In almost every act of public worship in the church, you will find a psalm. From the very beginning, these songs have been central to Christian worship, and that is not by accident. For the Psalms provide us with the full breadth of human experience. Praise and thanksgiving right alongside lamentation, both blessings and curses. However you are feeling, you can find a psalm to give it voice. And even if you aren't feeling what the psalmist is expressing, it can remind you that someone somewhere is feeling exactly that. This is the role the Psalms have long served in our worship. They give voice to the human experience. They teach us how to pray from and with that experience. They give us the very grammar we need to speak with God. Now, our psalm today doesn't provide any context clues to point us towards what the specific situation the psalmist was talking about. Some of the psalms will let us know what exactly is going on that they're responding to, but not Psalm 146. Psalm 146 stands independently. It's as if the author wants it to be ready to be universally applied for any time and any place. Which makes it interesting that we just happen to come to this particular psalm in a context in which we have just finished an election marked by bitter division. And whether you are elated by the results of that election or feeling utter desolation, here is Psalm 146, ready to speak to our context. And so what does the psalmist tell us? Put not your trust in rulers, nor in any child of earth, that is, mortals. For there is no help, no salvation in them. They are limited, the psalmist tells us, and their power always comes to an end. Our only true hope, the psalmist says, is in the Lord our God, the one who made all things and the one whose reign is eternal. And this Lord our God is the one, the psalmist says, whose reign is defined by justice for the oppressed, food for the hungry, and freedom for the prisoner. If that's what you seek in a ruler, remember, the psalmist says, where it is found, in whom it is found. That is what our psalmist would remind us of today. Now, that is not to say that our earthly rulers do not matter, or that there aren't real consequences to matters of government. The psalmist is not giving us permission to slide into apathy about the state of our world or to neglect our duty as members of a community and a nation. No, the biblical account is quite clear that the rulers of the nations carry with them great responsibility, and their choices carry real consequences for us all. Even Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, that great city of blood, even he was offered the opportunity to serve as a fount of blessing for the whole world if he would but rule in line with the principles of justice and righteousness that God showed him. Good rulers can do wonderful things, and the consequences of bad rulers are more than evident throughout the Bible. But what the psalmist would remind us of is that we must not root our hope in whatever state of affairs the present happens to be in, whether we are happy with that state of affairs or not. Nor can we root them in some bygone era when things were better. If only things were like they used to be. Nor even should our hope be in a world constantly progressing, improving, people finally choosing consistently the common good. None of these things, the psalmist says, will be a firm foundation for our hope. After all things have their season, and all things under the sun eventually pass away. And so if we place our hope in these things, then our hope too will eventually pass away. Happy are they who have the God of Jacob for their help, whose hope is in the Lord their God. So what then would it mean for us to place our hope in God? Well, today our readings give us the example of two widows. And as our psalm points out, the widows are the ones who are sustained by God, and the Hebrew people are instructed as soon as they enter into covenant with God to look after the widow. So our first widow is a mother who lives in Zarephath. And we are told in 1 Kings that this is a period of economic collapse for the whole region due to a severe drought that has ruined the crops and leaves the people without any food. And the cause of this drought is actually their king, King Ahab, whose policies promoted violence and oppression and who supported the worship of Baal and the other Canaanite gods. Notice again the impact of this earthly ruler on the most vulnerable, a widow and her child. And what hope does this woman have in her present state of affairs? She's out of food. Just a single meal left. Hoping in some future point without the drought will do her little good. Even so, even if she could hope for that, King Ahab has not relented. And she certainly has no power to convince him to repent. And yet, even in this dire situation, she does not fear, but trusts in the Lord. Trusts that the Lord will fulfill his promises. Promises to sustain the orphan and the widow. We see something similar with the widow in Mark's gospel. Here, Jesus is in the temple, watching the treasury, and he makes this contrast between the poor widow and the scribes. The scribes are rich, and we know that they do not follow the commands of the Lord, because we are told they have gotten their wealth by devouring the houses of the widows. In total contrast, the poor widow gives away just a penny to their riches, but it's all she has to live on. It's all she has because the society she lives in has failed her. Failed to take care of her as God commands. And so what she has to give looks all but worthless to the world. But it is a gift made, trusting not in the system of those scribes with their long robes, but one made trusting in the Lord, who cares for the stranger, who gives justice to the oppressed and food to those who hunger. So here we have the example of two vulnerable women placed in precarious positions by their mortal rulers. And the hope that these two widows have, it's not a hope in acquiring power and influence. It's not a hope that our side will win and yours will lose. It's not a hope in returning to a time of greatness, nor of an inevitable march towards progress. And it certainly isn't the sort of hope that is really just a false optimism that we so often adopt in an effort to bury our head in the sand and deny reality. No, what it is a hope in something greater than what any mortal can provide. A hope in the coming of a new heaven and a new earth. A hope in the resurrection of the dead. It is a hope in every wrong finally being righted, and every tear finally wiped away. This is the true value of the widow's penny. That even if all our earthly efforts fail, even if we lose, even if our best efforts appear worthless to the world, even if in the end we give it everything we've got, and still our lives take on no other shape but the shape of the cross. Even then, we will sing praises to our God while we have our being. And even then, we will follow in the way of Christ, caring for the stranger, feeding the hungry, and sustaining the widow. For it is God who made heaven and earth, the seas, and all that is in them. And it is God who shall reign forever. This is our hope, the hope of a widow.